Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Becky. In today's video, I'm going to be chatting all things books. In the floor in front of me, I have lined up every single book I read in 2023, and you and I are going to chat about them. At the beginning of 2023, I set my first ever reading goal on good old Goodreads, 20 books by the end of the year. And as the 2023 came to an end and 2024 has arrived today as I am filming this, I read a total of 28 books. So we're about to talk about all 28 books, rapid fire. The first book I read in 2023 set the standard so unbelievably high and set the tone for reading for my entire year. Under the Whispering Door was probably one of my favorite books I read last year. I gave this book a whopping 5 stars. I cried, I laughed. TJ Klune has one of my favorite writing styles. This was a 5-star read for me, and it began 2023 with such a bang. The second book I read in 2023 was Beach Read by Emily Henry. There is so much hype around this author and her books. The hype is real for Emily Henry. Her books are so good. I gave this book 5 stars as well. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Highly recommend reading this book. It was well written, humorous, enemies to lovers trope. We love that in this house. So the next book I read was Somebody's Daughter. This is a book I picked up on a whim at McKay's. Ashley Ford was vulnerable. She was funny. She told her story in such a way that was so powerful. I highly recommend this book. I gave this book 4 stars on Goodreads. So at the beginning of 2023, my husband and I were still doing our book club. Basically what we would do is we alternated months and each person picked a book to read. And my husband picked this one, and we were doing this for a while, but then my reading kind of took a life of its own, so I kind of ran off without him. While this type of book is not for me, I can appreciate the information that was in this book, and I gave this book a 3 star or 3 stars on Goodreads. This book I got for a steal of a deal. Do you see that price right there? That's right, 75 cents for this Trevor Noah Born a Crime book. I loved this book. I think people of all ages can read this book. I really enjoyed it. I gave this book a 5 stars on Goodreads as well. And 75 cents for this book. I did not realize I paid that little for this book. One Day in December. Let me tell you, I have mixed feelings about this book because I remember when I first got this book, I've been lugging this book from apartment to apartment for the past, since 2020. Okay, I've had this book since 2020. And for whatever reason in my brain, I was like, I want to read this book in the month of December. It was very important to me to do that. And let me tell you, I'm so glad I did not do that because the One Day in December, it has 2 seconds in the plot, okay? It doesn't matter at all. I struggled with this book. I had so many high hopes for this, specifically because it's set in December, and December is my favorite month of the year. I love the holidays. I gave this book 2.5 to 3 stars on Goodreads. I just wasn't really feeling it. All right, the next book I read in 2023, I do not have a physical copy here with me, but I will pop it up on the screen for you guys. It was Iron Widow. This book I borrowed from a friend of mine. It came highly suggested from her. I gave Iron Widow 3 stars on Goodreads. I loved the female lead, the protagonist in this story. Really enjoyed the badass woman, she had Mulan vibes, right? She's gonna do it what her culture says only men can do. Well, she's gonna do it, and she's gonna do it better than all these men. I loved that part of the book. There were certain parts of the book I wasn't a huge fan of. There was a certain section of the book that had to do with torture, and I could not read it because that kind of stuff is hard for me to read. 3 stars. It was pretty good. Definitely not my genre. But I did enjoy it, so I gave it 3 stars. Style A for Aunties. Holy cow, this book was so cute. I think that's the best way I know how to describe this book. And it was so much fun to read. It had everything that you could need. Family dynamics. It had a little bit of a romance to it. It had some oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? A little murder mystery thriller. I mean, not actually, but it had sprinkles of that. It was such a fun read. I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. You're on vacation, you have an off day, you want to read a fun book. I highly recommend this one for that. Okay, so this book was one of the books that my husband picked for our book club that we do. My brother-in-law loves this book and this series, and him and my husband were talking about it, which is why we read it. And gosh darn it, did I struggle through this book. I know that there is an audience out there for this type of book, but I am just not that person. A lot of the ideas were like just vague enough where I was like kind of following what was happening, but kind of not. Like I was trying to find someone in this book that like I could like emotionally relate to or attach myself to kind of like see through their eyes, because I was struggling. It took me a long time to finish this book, and I barely finished it. Barely, but I was like, you have to finish this book. You have to finish this book because it's book club. I gave this book 2 stars on Goodreads, and I don't think I'll be picking up any other books from this author, but I do appreciate that it's not a bad book. It's just not for me. And we have another book written by the wonderful TJ Klune. I had heard nothing but wonderful things about this book, so I was beyond excited to read it. And because I loved Under the Whispering Door, I gave that book 5 stars. I was like, here we go, TJ Klune out with another banger. Everyone loves it. I didn't love it as much as everyone else. So I loved the children in this book and like their magical powers and like the mystical element, like the fantasy element of it. I did like that there were like lessons being learned and like important life things, and it was heartfelt. At a certain point, it felt like it was being like lovey-dovey for the sake of being lovey-dovey. I don't even know the right word for that. Like, I don't know. But I gave this book 3 stars. I definitely liked Under the Whispering Door so much more. But yeah, 3 stars. It was a good read. It was fun. It was easy. But I did find myself being like, okay, we get it. We get it. You're like the perfect man. We get it. You have a great relationship with the orphans at the orphanage. We get it. Like, that's kind of how I felt at the end. Okay, Georgie all along. Okay, let me tell you, I gave this book 4.5 stars. I may increase it to 5, unsure at this moment. But I remember reading this book and being hooked from the first sentence. I loved reading this book. This is the book that I gave to a friend of mine who was wanting to get back into reading. I was like, read this book. Loathe to Love You by Ali Hazelwood. She has her tropes that she likes. The big, tall guy who's just... And then there's like a little petite girl. I can't blame her for it. I mean, it works for her. And they are good stories. I do love the women in STEM. I do love that about her. So 4 stars, Ali Hazelwood, Loathe to Love You. If you're looking for a good vacation read, this is it. I grabbed the guest list. Oh my gosh. This book was so much fun. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. It had me like gripped from the beginning. I did not expect the ending that it was. It was so unbelievably fun. Highly recommend this book. Another Emily Henry book. So I picked up Book Lovers. I believe I found this at a thrift store. And one thing in 2023 that I found so much was thrift stores be having some good books. People get rid of their books and just dump them out. Like, I found some awesome books that I read this year at a thrift store for barely any money. Like, I think I paid $1 for this Emily Henry book. Like, are you joking? Anyways, I gave this book 4 stars. I definitely liked Beach Read more, but I felt like this was also a good read as well. Okay, I hated this book. I'm just gonna be honest about it. May Cobb, what were you thinking? I gave this book 1 star on Goodreads, and honestly, I finished it just so I could complete the book, because otherwise, I don't believe I would have finished it. I can't even begin to describe to you the anger that I felt reading this book. I finished this book and I angry ranted to my husband in my nightgown and my bonnet. 1 star for this book, probably the worst book I read this year. I don't think I'll ever be picking up another May Cobb book again, because this one... All right, and so since The Hunting Wives, it was so hard to get through, and I'm not gonna lie, I struggled to want to read after that book. It made me so angry. I gotta move on. We're moving on to the next book, because I pulled out the main reason I started reading again. In 2020, I picked up this book by Christina Lauren, Unhoneymooners. This is my all-time 5-star book. It was the reason I started reading again. And let me tell you, it did not disappoint. It was just as good as the first time as I read it. And this is like, if someone's like, I want to get into reading, I like romance books, I'm not sure where to start, I give them this book. Song of Achilles. This is another book that I found at a thrift store. I just have a great memory for what the deals were because I love getting deals so much. I'm just kidding. It's on the back. There's so much hype around this book in particular, and everyone really likes this book. And it wasn't that I disliked this book, I just didn't fall in love with it as I expected, honestly. I gave it 3 stars. It took me a while to finish this book as well. I also was kind of in a book rut at this point, which is why I tried to read Unhoneymooners. And I thought maybe I was out of the book rut, but just turns out I was just in a book rut, and Unhoneymooners is just that good. And in case I wasn't in enough of a book rut before, here is another one that really tried me. I'm glad about you. I was not glad about reading this book. I gave this book 2 stars. I have nothing to say about it other than I didn't love it. Another Emily Henry banger. I gave this one 4 stars on Goodreads. They weren't enemies to lovers. They were best friends to lovers. And I guess like, not exactly, because it kind of like drifted apart a little bit. But yeah, as someone who married her best friend, I liked this book a lot. Emily Henry, the hype is real. All right, the next book, I also do not have a physical copy because it is my sister's book that I read on vacation, Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. So let me tell you, this was probably my favorite Ali Hazelwood book that I read. You know, more women in STEM, but the dynamic between, I can't remember their names right now, but the 2 main characters, I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was different, and I just really enjoyed this one. It was the epitome of the perfect vacation read, which I keep coming back to. I wonder if maybe I read books as an escape for my real life, which who doesn't do that? Killers of the Flower Moon. I read this book because of the movie that came out this year or last year, and my husband was really excited about it, and the movie was like almost 4 hours long. I brought a million snacks into that movie. The book was so much better than the movie, which like, of course it is. I was so disappointed because one of my favorite parts of this book was the reveal of who is the bad guy for the Osage people. The reveal in the book was so good. In the movie, you know who the bad guys are within like the first 2 seconds of the movie. And I was so disappointed by that. I was like, hello, this is why I liked the book so much. The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. Christina Lauren has a soft spot in my heart because in 2020, when I began reading again, I read literally every single book Christina Lauren had written up to that point, and I've kind of like fallen away from reading their books as often, but I don't know why I put off reading Christina Lauren's books, because that writing duo slaps every single time. The Soulmate Equation, I loved the premise of this book. I thought it was very clever and very interesting for like the app and how, you know, they test your DNA, you know, like the equation. I thought that was awesome, and I really enjoyed it, and it was fun and an interesting take on a romance book, I felt personally. And did I give this a rating already? I don't know what I told you guys. I gave it 4 stars. 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Oh my gosh. This is another book I found at a thrift store, just tossed aside. And I'm mad now because this is a 5-star read for me, and I left this on my bookshelf rack here on like my to be read shelf for so long. It was so good. Oh my gosh. I'm not gonna spoil anything because I love it that much and I want you guys to read it and not be spoiled on anything, because I knew nothing going into this book. I knew there was a lot of hype around it, but I like to go into books without, sometimes I don't even read the back if there's a lot of hype. I'm like, I just want to read it. That's my favorite thing to do. Like, just be like shocked, you know, makes it more fun. This is a book I found at, yet again, another thrift store with my sister. It was 50 cents. It was quick. It was easy. Like, look how big these letters are. And this is a small book. I read this book so quickly. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't like the best memoir or whatever I've ever read. It wasn't like a oh wow, like page turner. But it was a good book. Like she definitely told her story and the lessons that she learned, and I appreciated that, and I appreciated her sharing that with me through this book. But it wasn't like anything that I felt like I hadn't heard before. All adults here. I gave this book 2 stars. And I was so excited to read this book because the back was so promising in your adult relationship with your parents, like that dynamic, and like, you know, everyone has things going on, but we're all adults here, right? This book had so many, I felt, unnecessary details to the plot. I found myself skimming a lot reading this book, and I didn't really care about the characters. And that is something that's super important to me when I'm reading a book and just in life or watching TV shows or whatever. Like, I want to be emotionally invested. Like, I want to care about these characters. Like, you should make me care. And it's not that hard because I'm an Enneagram 2. Even I don't really care. Like, that's probably a bad sign. I think if this author had cut out like 3 subplots and like the main characters being like the granddaughter and the grandmother, if those 2 characters were the main characters and then the rest of the characters were kind of like side points, and it wasn't like we're going here and now we're going here and now we're going here and now we're going here, I think this would have benefited. I do understand the reasoning behind it, sharing all the stories of all those people, but I just found myself not really caring and felt like there was way too many details about people I didn't care about. Let's just have a moment for this book. I loved The Push. This was another book that I heard so much hype about. Specifically, one of my favorite YouTubers is Sarah Vargas, and she and I typically have very, very similar book takes. But she loved this book. And so again, this is another book that I picked up without reading the back, with having no clue what I was going into. I just knew there was hype around it. I also found it at a thrift store for $5. This book is a 5-star read for me. Holy cow. I was not expecting this book to be as good as it was. I was so sucked in the whole time. The chapters were short, which, like, we love short chapters in this house because it makes you feel like you're churning through. Loved it. You should read this book. I'm going to give you no spoilers because if you want the same experience as I had when you are reading this book, I don't want to tell you anything. Don't even read about it. Just pick it up. All right. So then I read Holly Madison's Down the Rabbit Hole. So I watched the documentary. I don't remember what streaming service it was on, but about the life of the Playboy Mansion. When I was younger, Mom, Dad, if you're watching this, I apologize. Whenever I was a kid at my grandparents' house, I would sneak watch The Girls Next Door because I've always loved reality TV, apparently. Like, freaking The Real Housewives, that is my jam. I loved The Girls Next Door when I was a kid. And watching the documentary, like, I knew some crazy stuff was happening in that Playboy Mansion, but it really, like, shook me a little bit. Like, I was so just like, gosh, you know? So this book and another book was featured, and I put this on my Christmas list, and my wonderful husband got it for me. I gave it 3 stars because here's the thing. I was really, really enjoying it, and I had such high expectations for this book going into it. And like the first like 75% of this book, I was super into. And she is writing from her perspective, right? So she is writing her view of things, and her personality and that kind of stuff is going to come through. But after a while, I felt like personally she was like putting the blame on everyone else, like not taking away the mansion. Like, she was in a really abusive relationship with someone who was controlling her, and like that is not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about her dynamic with other people, like the other girls in the house. Here's an example. I got really frustrated at one point because when she was talking about Kendra in particular, like she made it, the way she wrote it was making it sound like Kendra was the problem and it wasn't her. And like, yes, maybe that is her perspective, but as someone who does a lot of self-reflection, like there's 2 sides to every story, and the way she was writing it made me feel like she just believes she did nothing wrong in this relationship, like the dynamic with Kendra. And I just don't think that's possible. And I felt like it was really like tone deaf to write that way. But also, barring the fact I don't know Holly or Kendra and have no like idea how their relationship is, that could be true. I don't know. But Personally, I got annoyed by that. So I gave it 3 stars. By the end, I was like, oh my gosh, just take ownership for this, you know? And Holly went through a lot. And Hef is a piece of garbage, okay? For what he did to those girls. I really recommend watching that documentary. There's another book that was featured in the documentary that I also want to read. And this was a good book also. She definitely covered a lot of the stuff that happened to her in the house, and it was really interesting, and I'm really excited that she's out of the house and living her best life. And the last book I read in 2023, Tessa Bailey's It Happened One Summer. So I got this as a gift from one of my fellow book lovers in my family who I love. Shout out Jordan. I gave this book 4 stars. First of all, the steam in this book is real, okay? But also the main, like the guy character here, he was like fully bought in from the beginning, and it was kind of intense, but like I wasn't mad about it. It was fun. I gave it 4 stars. I liked the growth that, what is her character's name? Piper. I like the growth that Piper had in this book. I am excited because I know Tessa Bailey wrote Hook, Line, and Sinker, which is about the other sister, and like I'm pretty sure this guy's friend, the best friend or whatever. I like this book. I crushed this book in like 2 days on Christmas break. And I'm sure you can too. So my friends, that is every book I read in 2023 and like a quick little thought of what I thought about each of them. Next year, aka this year, 2024, I plan on reading 30 books. I set my goal this morning on Goodreads. Fingers crossed I can read the 30 because I got to 28 this year or last year, and I really feel like I can do it. I feel like I can do it. It's 2.5 books a month, so keep me accountable. Thank you guys so much for clicking this video, watching it to the end. If you have made it this far, please comment down below if you have set a goal this year, how many books are you trying to read? Thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe, like this video, and hang out for more content coming your way, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!